At my brother's 20th birthday, my mother lifted her glass. A toast, she said, to our golden boy, and to his sister, who will buy him the BMW he deserves. Laughter rippled across the backyard, bright and spontaneous, like applause. My father nodded approvingly. My brother grinned. Even the neighbors chuckled, thinking it was a joke. But it wasn't. I felt the sting before the glass even touched the table. My pulse slowed, my smile froze. And for the first time, I saw them as they truly were, beautiful, cruel, and confident I would never fight back. They were wrong, because the next call they received wasn't from me. It was from my lawyer. From the street. Our house looked like a picture-perfect real estate ad. White walls, manicured hedges, a flag snapping in the breeze, just so. Strangers would smile and say, "What a lovely family." They didn't notice the silence lurking beneath the paint. My father, Richard Hale, ran a construction company and believed that people broke the same way buildings did, if they stopped following the plan. He managed our lives like architectural blueprints. Every choice measured, every emotion trimmed. My mother, Victoria, decorated that illusion. She spoke softly, smiled beautifully, and made cruelty sound like care. "I only want what's best for you," she'd say, right before deciding for me. My brother, Aiden, was the golden project around which everything revolved. From his first football trophy to his college acceptance letter, the house orbited his successes. My father called him the Hale legacy. My mother called him the reason we worked so hard. They never defined what I was, but I understood. Someone had to hold the spotlight steady while he basked in it. When my grandfather, Harold Rowan, passed, he left me something that didn't fit their blueprint, a personal trust fund. Not huge, but entirely mine. Accessible at 24, or sooner if hardship demanded. Grandpa had whispered once, "Freedom needs a backup plan." I hadn't realized how prescient he was. I was 19 when I discovered it. My father dismissed the idea as unnecessary. My mother's smile was tight. "Families don't keep secrets," she said. But after that, they began treating me like a talking safety deposit box. At 22, I was finishing my creative writing degree while working part-time at the public library. Every evening, I returned home to find Aiden at the kitchen counter with friends, loud and careless. "Jen, grab us some chips," he'd call, and I'd do it automatically. Peace was easier than confrontation. My father admired his confidence, even when it teetered on arrogance. My mother adored him openly. "He has your father's fire," she once told me, "and your patience, dear. The perfect combination." Then she'd laugh softly, as though it were a compliment. After Grandpa passed, my parents became consumed with legacy. My father framed photographs of himself shaking hands with local officials. My mother hosted charity brunches in his memory. They never spoke about grief, only appearances. Then one evening, while arranging flowers for yet another gathering, my mother said casually, "You know, Aiden's turning 20 soon. It would mean so much if you used your trust to get him something special." I laughed, assuming she was joking. She wasn't. A few days later, I found a glossy car brochure on her desk. BMW 3 Series gift packages. A sticky note with my name was slapped across the cover. When I confronted her, she smiled as though I'd misunderstood. "Just an idea," she said lightly, "for family harmony." Harmony. The word lingered in the air like perfume. Sweet, cloying, suffocating. That night at dinner, my father brought up the car again. "It's symbolic, Jen. Success should stay in the family." He set his fork down, the sound sharp against the plate. "You'll take care of it. That's what responsible daughters do." He didn't raise his voice. He never needed to. In our home, control didn't shout. It asserted. Still, I remember my grandfather's voice from years ago, steady and low. "If they ever force you to choose between peace and dignity, choose dignity. Peace that relies on obedience isn't peace at all. It's a cage." I didn't know it then, but the lock on that cage was about to give. Aiden's 20th birthday felt rehearsed, like a production they'd been practicing for months. Gold lights strung across the yard, white linen on the tables, champagne glasses lined up like props. My mother drifted from guest to guest, pearls catching the glow. My father stood near the grill, tall and confident, shaking hands like the perfect patriarch. I stayed near the edge of the patio, holding a paper plate I didn't want. Everyone knew their part. My mother, the gracious hostess. My father, the provider. My brother, the celebrated son. I was background noise. Until my name was spoken. Jennifer, my mother said, tapping her glass. A toast. She flashed that practiced smile, the one that always meant danger. To our golden boy, she announced, and to his sister, who'll be buying him the BMW he deserves. For a moment, I thought I misheard, but the laughter proved I hadn't. Guests clapped. My father nodded. My brother smirked like the keys were already in his pocket. I could have followed the script, smiled, played along like always, but something inside me split. One of those silent breaks, you don't register until the damage is done. No, just one word. The sound drained from the world. Even the air stilled. My mother's smile froze. My father's expression sharpened. "Excuse me," he said, voice like a blade. "I'm not using my trust for him," I said. My voice stayed steady, though my hands trembled. "It's mine." The silence that followed felt alive, thick, waiting. Then came the hand. Not a slap, more like an electric shock. A burst of white pain across my cheek. Gasps echoed through the yard. The lights flickered. The glass slipped from my fingers and shattered against the stone patio. My brother's smirk disappeared. My mother hissed, "Smile, Jennifer. You're causing a scene." I did smile, but not the one she wanted. Later, I woke under harsh fluorescent lights, the taste of blood and metal coating my tongue. A nurse whispered, "You're lucky it wasn't worse." She had no idea what worse meant. The buzz of the ER lights drowned out every thought. I stared at the ceiling tiles until they blurred. My face pulsed with pain, my ribs felt tight, and my right hand shook when I tried lifting the plastic cup on the tray. A nurse was jotting notes without looking at me. When she finally met my eyes, she spoke gently. "Family." I hesitated. "They won't be coming." She nodded as if she already understood. Officer Rivera arrived next, her badge catching the harsh overhead light. She scanned the small cubicle, noting the bruises and the cracked phone on the desk. "Do you feel safe going home?" she asked. The honest answer was no, but the words lodged in my throat. After she left, I turned over my phone. 12 missed calls from Mom. A text from Aiden, "You ruined everything." I deleted each one slowly, one by one. That night, when the nurse wheeled me to the discharge desk, a familiar face awaited me. Mrs. Kemp, the elderly librarian I'd worked alongside, looked at me with the same care she reserved for fragile books, careful not to make me feel broken. "Oh, sweetheart," she said softly. "You don't have to go back there, you know." I managed something like a smile. Where else would I go? She slipped a small card into my hand. "There's help. Legal help. People who know what to do when families cross lines they shouldn't." Later, in her car, she drove me to a budget motel near the highway. She asked no questions. She handed me her extra charger, told me to rest, and promised she'd check in the morning. When she left, the silence was heavy, but it was clean. For the first time in years, no one was ordering me around. I opened my laptop. Months ago, I'd copied everything. Statements, payments, transfers from my grandfather's trust fund. At the time, I hadn't known why I was doing it. Just a quiet instinct that someday I'd need proof. I scrolled through the files. Each line of numbers glowed cold and precise. My parents had spent my trust on vacations, home renovations, and donations that funneled straight back to my father's business accounts. Evidence of theft wrapped in the guise of family loyalty. I remember Grandpa's rasping voice, steady and firm. "Freedom needs a backup plan, Jenny. Keep yours safe." I opened a new email and typed a name I hadn't spoken aloud in years. Rowan and Associates, my grandfather's lawyer. Though it was past midnight, I sent everything. The documents, photos, even the hospital discharge papers. The subject line read, "I think my grandfather expected this." I didn't expect a reply right away, but at 3:17 a.m., my phone lit up. "Rowan, you did the right thing. There's a clause for this hardship. We'll move fast. Don't go home." For the first time since the slap, my chest relaxed. At sunrise, I stood outside the motel. The air was sharp, the sky tinged with pale blue. I watched people drive to work, coffee in hand, their lives moving forward. I had been stuck so long I'd forgotten what moving forward felt like. When Rowan called that afternoon, his voice was calm and deliberate. Jennifer, I'm activating the hardship clause. It transfers full control of the trust to you and freezes any access from your parents. I pressed the phone closer. That's legal. It's what your grandfather intended. He built this clause in case you ever needed protection from them. Protection. The word landed heavier than the slap itself. By evening, Rowan had already secured a temporary restraining order. Officer Rivera called back to confirm the paperwork was underway. You've got a window of safety now, she said. Use it. That night, I sat in the motel bathroom, washing the blood from my hair, watching it swirl into the drain. The mirror reflected someone unfamiliar. Tired, yes, but alert. When Mrs. Kemp brought breakfast the next morning, I told her everything. She listened without interrupting, then gave my hand a firm squeeze. You're doing what most people never dare, she said. You're drawing a line. That afternoon, I signed the final documents. Rowan filed an emergency request for enforcement of trust control and personal protection. My signature felt steadier than I actually was. They had thought sending me to the ER would break me. They didn't realize it would become the place where I learned to rebuild. I turned off my phone, closed the motel blinds, and whispered into the quiet. This time, they don't get to decide what happens next. The next afternoon, the Hale house looked just the same. Manicured lawn, white picket fence, a flag swaying in the breeze. Nothing hinted that inside, the picture-perfect family was scrambling to salvage their story. From the living room window, Richard Hale's reflection stared back at him. Damage control, he muttered. We tell people she overreacted, emotional, unstable. Victoria stood by the fireplace, clutching a tissue she didn't need. What if someone posts about the party the neighbors saw? Then we deny it. Richard cut in. Our name still carries weight in this town. Aiden scrolled on his phone, jaw tight. She made us look bad, Dad. She'll come crawling back. She always does. He was wrong. At that moment, the doorbell rang. Victoria smoothed her sweater and went to the door, composing herself. She froze. Jennifer stood there, calm, hair pulled back, a small folder in her hand. Beside her, a man in a dark gray suit. Rowan. Jennifer, her mother said softly, almost rehearsed. You should have called, Victoria said. I did, Jennifer replied. You hung up. Richard appeared behind her, voice low and cutting. You had the entire town talking. Do you even understand what you've done to us? Jennifer glanced past him, taking in the living room. The perfect furniture, the framed photos, the life she had never been allowed to touch. Then she set the folder on the marble coffee table. Rowan spoke first. Mr. and Mrs. Hale, I'm Harold Rowan's estate attorney. I represent your daughter regarding her trust. Richard's laugh was short and bitter. Her trust. We've been managing that for years. Not anymore, Rowan said, calm and steady. He opened the folder and pulled out the stamped documents. Under the hardship clause in Mr. Rowan's trust, full control and ownership have been transferred to Miss Jennifer Hale, effective immediately. You no longer have access to or authority over any related accounts. The words lingered in the room like a verdict being delivered. Victoria's hands trembled. You can't just. Richard, say something, she pleaded. Richard's face flushed a deep crimson. This is insane. You're manipulating her. Rowan didn't flinch. All transactions made without her consent are under court review. Misuse of trust assets is considered financial abuse, a serious offense. Aiden rose abruptly. You're not seriously suing your own parents, Jen. Jennifer turned to him, voice steady. You used the card last month for tuition. That wasn't yours either. He blinked. Dad said it was fine. I know, she said. That's exactly the problem. Her mother shifted tone, softening, tearful. Honey, please. We're family. Let's not destroy ourselves over money. Jennifer looked at her, something sharp yet mournful in her gaze. It's never been about money. It's about choice. And you've never let me have one. Rowan handed her another document. A restraining order signed that very morning. For your safety, he said. Miss Hale will be living separately. You are not to contact her directly or through any third party. Victoria went pale. Richard sank back into the armchair. The slap of the paper against the table echoed through the room. They turned white, Jennifer would later realize. Not from shock, but from finally seeing themselves in the light they had always hidden from. "You did this to us," Richard said, his voice trembling, a fury that suddenly felt small. Jennifer exhaled, calm and deliberate. "No, you did this to yourself." She gathered her folder, nodded to Rowan, and stepped toward the door. The breeze lifted the edge of her hair as she stepped outside. The sun was sharp but kind, a warmth that didn't burn. Inside, her parents' voices rose. Anger, denial, fear. But they were fading. Rowan held the door. "You okay?" he asked. Jennifer allowed a faint smile. For the first time, she said, "Yeah." He nodded. "Your grandfather would have been proud." She glanced back at the house one last time. The flawless facade gleamed in sunlight, beautiful yet hollow. "They thought I'd never fight back," she thought quietly. "I didn't need to scream. I just needed proof." With that, she walked down the front steps. Not away from them, but toward herself. The following weeks felt surreal, like emerging from a long, vivid nightmare and adjusting to daylight. Her new apartment on Maple Street was small, its walls bare, furnished with second-hand pieces. But every sound inside belonged to her. No footsteps pacing behind closed doors. No voices reminding her to smile. Just the quiet hum of freedom. Each morning, sunlight crept through thin curtains, painting the room gold. She brewed coffee, sat by the window, inhaled the scent of rain-soaked pavement. For the first time, she didn't feel rushed. There were no roles to play anymore. The headlines came and went. Local business owner investigated for trust misuse. Names were never printed, but everyone knew. Richard Hale stepped away from his company on an indefinite leave. Victoria retreated from all her social circles. Aiden lost his scholarship once the incident became public. A week later, Rowan sent me the final notice, confirmation that the trust was now solely in my name. The document felt weighty in my hands, not because of the money, but because of what it represented. My grandfather's belief in me finally honored. I thought about calling Mrs. Kemp to let her know I was all right, but when I lifted the phone, I paused. Some people save you simply by pointing you toward the door. They don't need to be pulled into everything that comes after. So instead, I opened a blank file on my laptop. At the very top, I typed "The Cost of Silence." This story wasn't just about them. It was about me, and anyone who had ever confused obedience with peace. That night, watching the city lights flicker outside my window, I realized I didn't hate my family anymore. Hate was still a kind of attachment, and I had finally let go. For years, I thought silence made me weak. Now it sounded like strength, the kind that doesn't need an audience to exist. I closed the laptop, took a final sip of cold coffee, and whispered into the empty room, "So this is freedom." They once lifted their glasses to my obedience. Now I raise mine to my freedom. I don't live in that house anymore, but sometimes when the wind shifts, I still hear traces of that night. The shouting, the crashing glass, the moment I finally said no. It doesn't sting the way it used to. It simply reminds me that every ending begins with one person deciding they're done. I used to think reclaiming my trust fund was revenge. It wasn't. It was survival. It was proof that peace can thunder louder than pain when you stop apologizing for wanting it. If you've ever been told to stay quiet, remember, your silence doesn't belong to them. Speak, walk away, rebuild, even if your voice trembles. And if this story feels like your own, share it. Someone out there needs to know it's possible.